Blue Mountain Lake is a hidden gem nestled away between mountains and forests in the Adirondacks, in the heart of the Mohawk people's ancestral lands. On its shore stands the Middlebrook Conference Center, a Syracuse University property located 130 miles from main campus and about 90 miles from the nearest interstate. Facing away from the conference center out across the lake, you'd be forgiven for forgetting the United States even exists for a moment. But it does, and it's taken this land. While I was at Middlebrook, I had the opportunity to participate in the filming of a talk show. Host and creator Michelle Shenandoah invited several speakers, including 2 chiefs, to talk with her by the lake about what she called rematriation. The root of the conflict between Euro-American settlers and indigenous people is land. But it isn't as simple as fighting for territory as we tend to think about war. The conflict over land in North America isn't as simple as pushing borders around, as is often shown on historical maps of the European empires splitting up the continent. In order to understand this conflict, we need to understand that Haudenosaunee thinking goes beyond simple possession and exploitation of land in the way that many Westerners regard land. When discussing anything from empire to real estate, the focus of many Westerners is the same. How can I exploit this land to my benefit? To Westerners, land is a resource. To the Haudenosaunee speakers I met at Middlebrook, it's much more than that. There is a relationship between the Haudenosaunee and the land they inhabit, which is what makes Syracuse University's presence on their land all the more impactful than we often realize. The creation story often considered by the Haudenosaunee involves the descent of the Sky Woman to Earth from another world. Sky Woman fell through a hole in the sky, and beneath her a giant turtle surfaced from the sea. Several birds caught Sky Woman and lowered her safely to the turtle. This turtle became Turtle Island, or what many of us call North America, who presented itself to the Sky Woman in her time of need so that she could give birth to her twin sons. When Sky Woman died, her body was used to plant the seeds she brought to Turtle Island with her from the upper world. Compare this to the story of Adam and Eve, whom the Christian God gave the earth and charged with being the stewards of it, and you'll see the cultural rift that makes conversations about land so difficult. While Westerners view the land as our kingdom and birthright, the Haudenosaunee view it as our fellow being. One of the speakers and guests on Rematriated Voices, a Bear Clan member who everyone lovingly calls Mama Bear, was critical of the story of Adam and Eve, particularly of how Eve was fashioned from Adam's rib. Mama Bear considered this to be nonsense. She cited the very title of her show, Rematriated, as evidence of this. In her culture, while men can be chiefs, the ultimate power of a group lies with the women and the clan mother. After all, it's their sons, husbands, and brothers that will be going off to fight should they declare war, she said. And this vesting of power in women runs all the way back to Sky Woman as the first human on Earth, and how she created humankind naturally as a mother, and how her body was used to grow food. This stands in sharp contrast to how God created women from Adam's rib. This is why Michelle called her show rematriation, as opposed to repatriation, a term more commonly used by Westerners. It's difficult to propose any kind of solution regarding Blue Mountain Lake. Its history, as told by most websites, starts in 1874, omitting the thousands of years of indigenous history. While the conference center provided a space for rematriated voices to be filmed, opening dialogue between white students like myself and indigenous Americans, the building itself is an intrusion into indigenous lands and history. It feels at once positive to visit this place and engage with indigenous speakers, but also hypocritical to stand on university grounds that have expanded beyond the land already stolen here in the city of Syracuse. Middlebrook feels like it needs its own land acknowledgement. So what does rematriation look like for the Haudenosaunee? At this point, there's obviously no way for all the residents of the United States descended from Europe, Asia, and Africa to repatriate to the Old World. What step can all of us take to understand, respect, and help to mend the relationship between the Haudenosaunee and their ancestral homelands that we now occupy? Personally, I think engaging with thoughtful journalism and nonfiction storytelling is the best course of action that every person can take. I've made small steps myself over the past semester to try and improve my sensitivity, knowledge, and rhetoric when discussing Indigenous issues. Most importantly, I've stopped regarding Native Americans as one blurry and homogeneous category of people who in the past inhabited North America. This is not only inaccurate, it's also harmful and minimizes both the vast cultural diversity among Indigenous people and the efforts of modern Indigenous people to insist on the United States their continued presence on the continent and our country's obligation to make amends for its imperial past. Recognizing the borders of the modern Oneida Nation and Onondaga Nation reservations, which do not contain the entirety of their ancestral homelands, right down the street from Syracuse is a step in the right direction. The next step is listening to personal stories about individual experiences and learning to recognize Indigenous Americans as people who are still here and whose struggles deserve attention, rather than an ambiguous group who lived here in the past and suffered crimes at the hands of many of our ancestors that we'd rather not think about. Through my work on Rematriated Voices, my reflection on that work in this project, and the productions I'll be a part of in 2025, I hope to do my part in engaging thoughtfully and respectfully and improving the rhetoric surrounding modern Indigenous Americans.